So our next and first speaker, first external speaker today is Shilpi Kapoor. And I met Shilpi a couple of years ago when we were still able to travel. Shilpi owns 3 disability-related businesses and is one of the top entrepreneurs around disability in India. Given how many employees we have in India, I think it's really important that we talk about accessibility from the point of view of people that are actually delivering inclusion in India. So I'd like to hand over to Shilpi and say thank you very much for being part of our event today. It's a real honor to have you with us.
Anytime. The pleasure is mine, Neil. Always a pleasure when you invite us to come and speak.
I would like to welcome you as well, Shilpi, because it's as Neil said, it's a great privilege actually to have someone to include India now, and I think we're going to have a chat. I think really where we're going to ask you a few questions and get some discussion going round about some just basically what you're doing. So Neil gave a little bit of an introduction to you. Would you like to tell us just a little bit more about yourself, and then I'll start tormenting you with some questions.
Sure. Thanks, Jim, for that. So I'll just go back in history, back to 93 to 95, actually. I think it's important to share my story so that people understand where we're at and what we do. A kid out of college, stuck onto the internet, learned how to hack in a chat room, till one day met a boss of mine who hired me a job as a hacker. Worked on the internet with him. And before I knew it, I'd worked with him for about 2 years. And he had taught me everything about hacking. If you know anything about hacking, you know you have to be really fast, you have to be very agile, and you have to be on top of your game. And on this one shift, he and I were on the shift together. And, I caught the hacker and he didn't. For me, that was an eye-opening moment, because when I asked him what happened and how I beat him to the game, he actually turned around and told me that he was paralyzed all of the time that I knew him. And I had no clue about it. I had zero inclination after knowing someone for 2 years of my life. Right? So for me, what was shocking was that over the internet, it can be anybody, any disability, but as long as the person can do what they do, it really doesn't matter. The disability is incidental. So I think that's what is the reason that I really do what I do today. BarrierBreak is a company which does digital accessibility. Took on that format because in a country like India, I could never change physical infrastructure, but I can surely change the digital space. As Neil said, there's so much of the Atos team in India, which is doing technology. There are so many other tech companies in India that are developing technology. So I said, why not take on digital accessibility? And that's really what we do. And it's interesting that as a company, we are, we put people with disabilities at the center of this conversation, right? And out of our team, nearly 70% of our people are people with disabilities themselves. So they are a part of the team. And so that's really a small snippet about what we do.
Okay. Now, just moving on to some of the things that interest me. Within the accessibility world, there's a big debate between automated and manual testing. Now, I've seen automated testing improving, and I've also noticed that the people who keep pushing it and telling me it's improving tend to be companies that they bulk test massive amounts of simple web pages. So, I mean, I suspect there's a vested interest in there, because obviously they need automation. But within Atos, we're also great believers in manual testing as well. While we would embrace some aspects of automated testing, we would usually switch to we would also do a lot of manual testing as well. I'm just wondering what your opinion on this debate between automated and manual testing is.
So I think, the UK government did an amazing study where they made a web page and filled it with lots of different errors. and then used a large number of automated tools, which were free and open source, and went out and tested that page with all of those tools. What is amazing was that the data shows on the maximum, any of the tools only got 40% of those errors, right? And some of the tools only got as much as 13 to 15% of those errors, right? I think automation is surely something for the future. I don't debate it. But I think it can catch what is intuitive. I think it can catch what is easy to find. You can find out whether an image has an image description, but you can't find out whether that image description is correct. I remember going to a website and there was this person who was the CEO of the company, a photograph on it. And the alt text was totally different than that. So from a perspective of an automated tool, it was the right thing. But from the perspective of actually a user experience, it was totally the wrong thing. I think where automation does well is in identifying what we can at the code level. But developers code so differently, right? They might yet make a heading, but use an ARIA level to set it. You need to also look at that nuance, right? There are times that it's about how that perspective is heard or used by a person with disability. So our CEO was just giving another talk just about half an hour back, and she is a native screen reader user. And her biggest question was, do you know how much I listen to as a screen reader user on a daily basis? I have so much information thrown at me, right? And now if you also give me the information incorrectly, then I have to listen to even more, right? So I think there is a balance on how far automation can take you. And I think for the balanced way, it is manual. I think especially with more and more of the websites becoming dynamic, the applications becoming very dynamic in their nature, in their interaction, I think automation will struggle at this point, but I believe that over some time, it will become better. But I would say a combination of both. One that will help you also manage your costs, but putting out manual testing wouldn't do you very well from an accessibility risk perspective and otherwise.
Okay, so you sort of feel that at the moment automated testing can pick up some of the simple stuff. So for instance, I wouldn't want to waste my time with a manual tester checking screen contrast or making sure that things are color safe, the simple things, and actually allow the manual testers to, shall we say, do the interesting parts of the testing and things like that. So perhaps they actually help our manual testers by taking a bit of the drudgery away from things. Okay. So your company adopted, as you were saying, a people first approach sort of thing. And I mean, why do you feel that lets you get closer to accessibility?
So accessibility is about making technology accessible to people with disabilities. But if I give it another twist, it's about making things accessible for people using an alternate sense, just for 2 seconds, right? If you can't see, you use your hearing. So if I just flip the whole conversation and I, look at, let's say, you in the room right now, or Neil in the room right now, who are using specs to, at this point of time, all of us are going to need all of these accessibility options, right? And we have to look at it differently rather than the atypical way. Now, if I took the first understanding that accessibility is about people with disabilities, and if you don't include those same people and how they use systems, and if you and I make assumptions for them, then obviously we're going to get it wrong, right? So I'll give you an example of one of the first ATMs that came out in India, right? Came out with a lot of fanfare. It was supposed to be disabled friendly and all of that. And, the disabled started to go to use it. And it would take hours for them to hear the conversation of the instructions, because the instructions were so verbose, right? It kept talking to them about the steps. And before they knew it, they got bored waiting for the instructions to come, right? So if they'd done something as simple as, let's have the first time instruction and then skip detailed instructions because I've got used to using the ATM and I come and I remove my money every 3 months or 2 months or every month. I now know the steps. Don't give it to me in such a large amount of time. So I think having people with disabilities, if that bank had taken that approach of putting in a disabled test to understanding that visually impaired people actually listen faster than us. Just listen to any of our friends using screen readers. The pace at which they hear the system, it's, you have to wonder what they heard. It's gibberish for me, but they understand every word of what is said. So I think having them as a part of the process is critical, right? And what I realized was that all of us around the world, right, were looking at focusing on this audience, but we had, very few people in our own ecosystem that comprised of people from this audience. So we tipped it and we said that, can we employ people with disabilities first, right? And today, 70% of the team comprises of people with disabilities. One, it gives job opportunity. Second, they are not personas for us. They're actual people, right? So I can actually go on record and tell a team member of mine, think about how Preeti would use this, right? I don't have to say there's a persona who does this, this, and this, who has this lifestyle. It's so real for them that the understanding that comes out is that. So I think that's, I think Robin's on this call. I would say, listen to Robin before you listen to me, right? And I think that's critical. So I think that's the fun of it. And that's why the people first approach for me. And it shouldn't only be people who are screen reader users, but it has to be people from all diverse abilities that need to come to be a part of the team. It's kind of like saying gender, right? You say inclusion and then you only have one large population and everybody else is a minority. And here you want to focus on accessibility, but you don't have those people as a part of the team because they have an opportunity here to grow.
Okay. And just 70% of your company. That's absolutely phenomenal figure, and it gives you, as you say, that flexibility. It's, as you said, it's not a persona; it's a person. Really, I mean that's quite incredible, and I found it interesting as well because when you were talking about people not wanting to listen to instructions and things like that, it made me think of my children who don't want to read and who they look at me as if there's some, if why are you reading that? Why are you? I mean, I would normally go first to the instructions, whereas my children pick the thing up. And when I say my children, they're well into their teens now, and they just expect something to be intuitive and just to work the way they expect it. And I think, when you've got all the diverse people checking your systems and making that systems going to be so much more user friendly for everyone, which I think is a great thing as well with the work you do. And I take your point. I remember the first time I heard someone use a screen reader who could really use it, I thought, what? And I realized that they were assimilating information faster than I could read it, much faster than I could read it, sort of thing. So it was quite incredible, and I think a lot of people get struck by just the speed of it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm aware I'm a little bit sort of hogging the conversation a little bit there. So does anyone else want to come off mute and ask Shilpi anything before we continue with the questions?
I'd like to come in and echo all of the stuff you said about screen reader use. I use text to speech, and I can see. I use it because I'm dyslexic rather than blind. I use it faster than normal speech, but about maybe a third as fast as an accomplished screen reader user. It took me quite a while to become accustomed to listening to stuff at maximum volume, and I can only do it for a short period of time. So I'd just like to echo what you're saying is about making sure that we don't create verbose websites and applications. Now, Screenreader users that are really good actually access their verbosity settings in their screen readers to turn down the amount of information, because it's an incredible cognitive load that we're putting on people listening to all of this stuff. And essentially also, if you don't structure your website correctly, screen readers work in a linear manner, so they're just going to read everything. So it's like listening to the whole of the sort of Financial Times read straight across, without any kind of headlines or anything else. So it's really important to give these things structure. And I think that when you start to experience how people are using assistive technology, it gives you much better understanding of why that structure is necessary.
Jim, could I ask a question, please?
Of course.
Hi, good morning, Shilpi. Really inspiring to hear from you. One of the things I'm interested is managing diverse teams, because diverse teams can be really innovative, creative, bringing productivity. And of course, we are, and I'm just really struck, and it struck me that, of course, you are managing a very diverse team in comparison to what probably a normal team leader or manager at Atos is doing. And I was just wondering whether there's any leadership lessons you can share of what you're saying. That's what I have learned. So we actually can all benefit from your vast experience of managing diverse teams.
Sure. So I think one of the first things that we learned was that if we wanted to include people with disabilities, specifically in India, we don't have a great education level of the people with disabilities, because they don't have the educational systems in place to assist them to get a higher education. For example, in India, very few deaf people would actually have anything beyond a school education, right? They wouldn't have anything beyond that. But they are amazing people. They have amazing skill sets. So one of the first things that we did was we took away that we wanted to hire graduates, right? And we said we wanted to hire people who had a willingness to learn. That was the first. The second thing that we did, which was really interesting, was we split up processes into very small bite-sized processes, right? And we said, this is a process that needs to be done. So generally, when somebody joins an organization, there's this whole process which is thrown at them. And they're like, oh God, what am I going to do with all of this? How much do I have to do? And what we learned was that if we teach people in small bits and pieces, and this is across BarrierBreak, it doesn't matter whether you have a disability or you don't, right? It helped us teach people in a much more stronger method. You will not believe we've got our entire PDF remediation team comprises of deaf people, physically challenged people, autistic people, right? And visually impaired people, and then quote unquote normal people in somebody's language. And what's interesting is that the deaf actually give us the maximum productivity once they've learned the process. I have never seen such productivity as I get with them, right? Yes, communicating with them would be in having a sign language interpreter online, right? As much as everybody says captions are what you should have, I can tell you my deaf employees don't read the captions, right? They want their interpreter because they haven't had such an amazing, education that they can read at the same pace that you and I speak. Right. But interpretation works for them. So I think we have to look at it differently, and to add to that, I think the people first approach also helps, because you've got employee loyalty, our attrition rates are very low, and obviously we stand for a mission, right? So I think all in all, it's something what most companies aspire to have. Yeah. As so I think those are some of the lessons I would take away from that.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, I've got some questions coming in the Q&A from people. First of all, James has been commenting that we do a bit of this work with our apprentice schemes as well, and also that we work with we're ambitious about autism as well. I think we'll be talking about that later on when we look at growing it to knowledge. And also David Barra has been making some points in here, and I think they're very, very valid. So I'm going to just get David to ask. I was basically asking, is it worth thinking looking at the veterans point of service and veterans as a source of basically testers and people when we're actually looking for diversity there? And I'm just wondering what you think of that.
I think it should be looked at. Like, I know of one organization that uses prison workers to do document remediation and testing in the world. So that's so interesting. I think veterans is surely a choice, right? I think the key is to really identify groups of people that can give you that flavor of understanding disability and including that into your ecosystem, right? And I think veterans would make a perfect hub for that. The thing that you might have to put into place might be training, so as to skill them, to bring them to the level of testers or remediation people or accessibility experts, which I think is surely doable. So I would say it's a fabulous idea, David.
I think so too, because it tends to be in the UK as well. We tend to find veterans sometimes, they find it difficult as well to integrate back into society as well, not through any fault of their own, because the supports and things aren't.
But if I may interject, Jim, so this is an area where I actually think we do pretty well, because there is intersectionality between our veterans communities, and we've made a commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant and our diversity networks. We have the crossover between our Atos Adapt and the veterans communities, and I think that it is a sort of a rich vein of internal knowledge and experience that we do tap into. We can always do more, and I think that there is this wounded, injured and sick community that we ought to welcome back, because into business, that accessibility is a route to making sure that we can access their skills, because actually a lot of the people that come out of the forces are highly skilled, highly motivated, highly trained people, but we have to be mindful of the fact that they're going to need adjustments to civilian life, working in an organization that is a lot less structured, and require the kind of support around technology, ergonomics, etc., that they need to be able to be fully integrated into the organization. That said, it's stuff that we are doing, and I would support any other company to do the same.
Okay, that's great, Neil. I think we've got one last question for Shilpi, and I'd also say to the attendees, if you want to ask something, if you put a question in the Q&A, I'll try to get to them, or if you want to speak or something, you can always use the raise hand function. I want this to be, this is an interactive day, very much so, and it belongs to everyone, not just the panelists, the people speaking. So please feel free to join in if you have something through the Q&A, or even if you've got something you'd like to speak, we can promote you and allow you to speak within the system as well. So finally, because I'm aware our time is moving on, Shilpi, how do you think organisations can adopt this people first approach in accessibility? Because it sounds wonderful. So what tips would you give people who want to introduce this into their company?
I think the first step I would say is have intent. It's something which everybody says, but doesn't necessarily always adhere to. So I think have intent. Go out and find your first few people without being scared about how accessible your systems are. Right. I think that's one of the deterrents for people to hire people with disabilities first, because they are always looking at, this is not accessible, that is not accessible. When you bring in those people, tell them that you'll work with them to make the systems more accessible along with them. right? Nobody gets it right the first time. I know I didn't. Today we have a lot of it right. But even today we learn along the way. And I think everybody will tell you accessibility is a journey. So I hate getting people to get scared of accessibility and running away from hiring disabled people. But bring in people and work with them to make systems more accessible. So that would be the second thing that I would really go out and do. The third thing I would do is think about how are you going to integrate them into your organization. Because there is a lot of resistance often, which is probably not even known by the person that they have a bias, right? There's this hidden bias that people have, and you have to help people overcome them. So I'll give you an instance. As a company which is so dedicated to accessibility, can you believe there was a period in the middle where some of my managers thought that a screen reader tester couldn't do HTML and code. And we had to prove to them that they can. Why aren't you giving them that part of the work? You know, why is a functional accessibility tester doing this? So it's a bias that just kind of creeped in when somebody joined the organization, right? So you have to keep breaking those and demystifying that situation to help people realize how valuable they are, right? And you have to keep that at the forefront of this. Every time you find a manager who has that, it's about them just noticing and realizing how valuable they are as people. It's like any other employee, right? You've got a bias, you don't really realize. But sometimes these biases are a little more stronger or underlying, and we might not even know about them. So I'd say work through those. And I think take people with disabilities across all teams, which is very, very critical. Very often we see them put in one box or in one team. They can be part of HR, they can be part of finances, they can be part of social media and digital marketing, they can be part of testing, development. Go out looking for them, and it's an amazing journey from there on. So I think that those are some of the things I would tell companies to do, and learn along the way and be ready to learn constantly. And you'll be shocked at how you would come across situations that would amaze you that this is possible. I can tell you, we trained all of our screen reader testers in HTML. Not a single one of them had learned HTML before they walked into our organization. Can you believe they scored better than people who had done engineering in HTML after being taught it, right? They were better at it. Their scores were better than everybody else on the team. And then you sit back and say, why were we creating a problem for them? Why did we have this barrier in our minds? So I think those are the things that organizations need to do to take the people first approach.
Okay, thank you. That's absolutely fabulous. I could talk all day to you, Shilpi, but I think that we have to sort of call a halt there. Thank you very much, and for our first contribution from India, and I'm sure it won't be our last. It was fabulous. Thank you very much for the time that you took there. And,